I never thought shame could arrive wrapped in designer clothes and fake smiles. There I stood in my son's new house, wearing my best Sunday dress, holding a homemade casserole that suddenly felt like evidence of everything I wasn't. My daughter-in-law, Victoria, floated through the room like she owned not just the house but the very air we breathed. She looked perfect, hair styled, makeup flawless, wearing clothes that cost more than my monthly rent. Then she leaned close and whispered words that would change everything. "Honestly, Claire, you don't really fit our family's image anymore." The room kept buzzing with conversation, but I heard nothing else. Just those words, sharp and cold, cutting through years of trying, hoping, believing I mattered to my own son. My name is Claire Morrison, and I'm 58 years old. I raised my son, Brandon, alone after his father walked out when he was 3. I worked 2 jobs most of his childhood. Mornings at the grocery store, nights cleaning offices downtown. I never missed a parent-teacher conference. I sewed patches on his jeans when money was tight. I made birthday cakes from scratch because bakery ones cost too much. When he got into college, I took out loans I'm still paying off. I did everything a mother could do. And somehow that stopped being enough. Brandon met Victoria during his final year of law school. She came from money, the kind that whispers instead of shouts. Her family owned hotels, investment properties, things I barely understood. First, Victoria seemed nice enough. Polite, distant but polite. She smiled during our weekly dinners but never ate much of my cooking. She asked questions about my life but her eyes always drifted to her phone. I told myself she was just shy, just adjusting. Brandon seemed happy, and that was all that mattered. They got engaged 6 months after graduating. The wedding was at her parents' country club, an event I couldn't afford to contribute to properly. I offered what I could. Victoria's mother, Patricia, smiled tightly and said, "That's sweet, Claire, but we have it handled." I wasn't part of the planning. I wasn't asked about flowers, music, or the guest list. I showed up, wore a dress I'd borrowed, and watched my son marry into a world that didn't want me. After the wedding, things shifted. Brandon called less. Our weekly dinners became monthly, then every few months. When I asked if something was wrong, he'd say, "Mom, I'm just busy." You understand, right? I did understand. Or I tried to. But understanding didn't make it hurt less. Victoria was always polite on the surface. She'd hug me at family gatherings, but it felt like hugging a mannequin. Stiff, cold, rehearsed. Then they bought the house. A massive 3-story place in the nicest part of town. Brandon called, excited, and invited me to the housewarming party. I baked my famous casserole, put on my best dress, and drove over, hoping maybe this fresh start would bring us closer again. The house was stunning. Marble floors, chandeliers, furniture that looked like it belonged in magazines. I felt small the moment I walked in. Everyone there looked expensive, polished. I recognized some people from the wedding. Victoria's friends, her parents, her brother. I didn't recognize anyone from Brandon's side except me. I found him in the kitchen and he hugged me quick. "Mom, glad you made it. Put the casserole anywhere." Then he was gone, pulled into conversation with someone in a suit. I stood there holding my dish, feeling invisible. That's when Victoria appeared beside me. She smiled, that practiced smile, and took the casserole. "Let me take that," she said sweetly. Then she leaned in, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "Honestly, Claire, you don't really fit our family's image anymore." Froze. My hands went numb. I stared at her, but she'd already turned away, placing my casserole on a back counter like it was something to hide. Around me, people laughed, clinked glasses, admired the house. No one noticed me standing there, crumbling from the inside out. I wanted to leave. I wanted to grab my dish and walk out and never come back. But something stopped me. Maybe it was years of swallowing pain. Maybe it was the memory of every sacrifice I'd made. Or maybe it was just the realization that I'd been erased from my own son's life, and no one even cared enough to do it kindly. I decided right then, standing in that kitchen, that I wouldn't just disappear quietly. Not this time. I stayed at the party another hour. Smiled. He nodded. I pretended everything was fine. But inside I was planning. Because here's the thing Victoria didn't know. She didn't know that before I worked at the grocery store, before I cleaned offices, I spent 15 years working at Pinnacle Trust Bank. I started as a teller, worked my way up to assistant loan manager. I left when Brandon was 10 because the hours conflicted with being a single mom. But I still had connections. I still knew people. And I knew exactly how mortgages worked. I also knew something else. Brandon had mentioned months ago that he and Victoria were getting a loan for the house. Big one. He'd been nervous about the approval process, the credit checks, the income verification. The next morning I called an old colleague. His name was Raymond Caldwell, and he'd been my supervisor at Pinnacle Trust for years. We'd stayed in touch, exchanged Christmas cards, met for coffee occasionally. "Ray," I said when he answered, "I need a favor. Just information." I explained the situation, not everything, just enough. Ray was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Claire, you know I can't access client files without reason." "I'm not asking you to break rules," I replied. "I just want to know if a loan was approved recently. For my son. I'm his mother. I just need peace of mind." Ray sighed. "Give me a name." I did. "Brandon Morrison and Victoria Hayes Morrison." Ray said he'd check and call me back. 2 hours later my phone rang. "Claire," Ray said carefully. "I pulled up the file. Your son and his wife took out a significant mortgage. Nearly $900,000. My stomach tightened. "And it was approved 3 months ago. Everything went through standard channels. But here's the thing. I was the one who signed off on it." I sat down slowly. "You approved their loan." I did. I remember the file because the income verification was tight. Victoria's family co-signed part of it, but your son's income alone wouldn't have qualified them. I pushed it through because the paperwork was solid, and the co-signers had excellent credit. My mind raced. Ray had approved their loan. Ray, who owed me nothing but had been kind enough to help when I asked. And suddenly I had an idea. A beautiful, terrible idea. "Ray," I said slowly, "would you be willing to meet with me? Maybe come to a family dinner?" He hesitated. "Why?" "Because I think my son and his wife need a reminder that the people who helped them get where they are deserve respect." There was a long pause. Then Ray laughed, low and understanding. "You want me to show up and remind them I'm the reason they have that house?" "Something like that." "Claire, that's bold." "I know." Another pause. "When's the dinner?" I smiled for the first time in days. "I'll let you know." I called Brandon that afternoon. My voice was steady, calm. "Hey, sweetheart. I was thinking maybe I could host a family dinner next week. Just you, Victoria, and me. I'd love to cook for you both." Brandon sounded surprised. "Really? That'd be great, Mom. Let me check with Victoria." He called back an hour later. "Victoria says Sunday works." "Perfect," I said. "And actually I was thinking of inviting an old friend. Someone from my banking days. Would that be okay?" "Sure, whatever you want, Mom." I hung up and texted Ray. "Sunday, 6 p.m. My place. Wear something professional." He replied with a thumbs up. The days leading up to Sunday felt like preparing for battle. I cleaned my small apartment until it shone. I planned a menu, simple but good. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, homemade rolls. I even bought a small bouquet of flowers for the table. I wasn't trying to impress them with luxury. I was reminding them where they came from. And I was about to show them exactly who held the keys to their perfect life. Sunday arrived. I cooked all afternoon, moving through my tiny kitchen with purpose. At 5:30, I changed into a simple navy dress, pulled my hair back and waited. Brandon and Victoria arrived at 6 on the dot. Brandon hugged me. Victoria offered a polite smile and handed me a bottle of wine. "Thanks for having us, Claire," she said sweetly, like she hadn't whispered poison in my ear a week ago. "Of course," I replied evenly. "Make yourselves comfortable. We have one more guest coming." Victoria's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Oh, an old colleague from my banking days." He should be here any minute. Right on cue, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Ray, dressed in a crisp suit, holding a small gift bag. He smiled warmly. "Claire, good to see you." "Ray, come in." I stepped aside and watched Brandon and Victoria's faces. Brandon looked mildly curious. Victoria looked confused. I made introductions. "Brandon, Victoria, this is Raymond Caldwell. We worked together at Pinnacle Trust for years. Ray, this is my son Brandon and his wife Victoria." Ray shook their hands, his smile professional and friendly. "Nice to meet you both. Claire's told me so much about you." We sat down for dinner. The conversation started light. Ray asked Brandon about his law career, complimented the wine Victoria had brought. He was charming, easy, the kind of person who made small talk feel natural. Victoria seemed to relax slightly. She even laughed at one of Ray's jokes. Then, halfway through dinner, Ray leaned back and said casually, "So, Brandon, how are you enjoying the new house?" Brandon's face lit up. "It's amazing. Best decision we ever made." "I'm sure," Ray said, nodding. "Big investment though. Real estate in that area isn't cheap." "No, it's not," Victoria chimed in, her voice proud. "But we worked hard for it." Ray smiled. "I'm sure you did. Getting approved for a mortgage that size must have been stressful." Brandon nodded. "It was. We had to jump through a lot of hoops." "I bet," Ray said, then paused. He looked at me, then back at Brandon. "You know, it's funny. I actually remember your file." The table went quiet. Brandon blinked. "What?" Ray took a sip of water. "Your mortgage application came across my desk at Pinnacle Trust. I was the loan officer who approved it." The color drained from Victoria's face. Brandon stared. You approved our loan." "I did," Ray confirmed. "Back in March. Nearly $900,000, co-signed by Victoria's family. Solid application, but it was close. Your income alone wouldn't have qualified you, Brandon. But with the co-signers and the employment verification, we made it work." Victoria's hands gripped her fork tightly. Her perfect composure was cracking. Ray continued, his tone still friendly but pointed. "I remember thinking at the time, this young couple is getting a real opportunity. I hope they appreciate the people who helped them along the way." He looked directly at me when he said it. Brandon's face flushed. He glanced at me, then at Victoria, then back at Ray. I didn't know you were the one who approved it." "Most people don't know their loan officers personally," Ray said with a shrug. "But your mother and I go way back. When she mentioned you'd bought a house, I put two and two together." Victoria set her fork down carefully. Her voice was tight. "That's quite a coincidence, isn't it?" Ray said pleasantly. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. I stayed quiet, letting Ray's words sink in. Brandon shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, you didn't mention Ray worked at the bank." "You never asked," I replied calmly. Victoria's eyes darted between Ray and me. I could see the calculations happening behind her eyes. The realization that the woman she'd dismissed, the woman who didn't fit their image, had connections that literally held their financial future in her hands. Ray finished his meal and wiped his mouth. "This was wonderful, Claire. Thank you for inviting me." "Anytime, Ray." He stood, shook Brandon's hand again, nodded to Victoria. "Enjoy that house. You're very lucky." Then he left, leaving the three of us in heavy silence. Brandon spoke first, his voice strained. "Mom, what was that about?" I met his eyes. "What do you mean?" "You invited the man who approved our loan to dinner. That's not a coincidence." "No," I said quietly. "It's not." Victoria leaned forward, her voice sharp now. "Are you trying to intimidate us?" "I'm not trying anything," I replied. "I invited an old friend to dinner. He happens to be someone who helped you. I thought you'd want to thank him." "Thank him?" Victoria laughed bitterly. "That was a power move, Claire." "Was it?" "Yes. Or was it just a reminder?" "A reminder of what?" Brandon demanded. I stood slowly, gathering plates. A reminder that the people you dismiss, the people who don't fit your image, are sometimes the same people holding the doors open for you. The words hung in the air. Victoria's face turned red. I never. You did, I interrupted. Last week. At your housewarming. You whispered in my ear that I don't fit your family's image. Brandon's eyes widened. She said what? Victoria's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since I'd met her, she had no words. You said it, I continued, my voice steady. You made me feel small in a house I helped you afford. Not with money, but with the sacrifices I made raising the man who qualified for that loan. The man I put through college while working 2 jobs. The man whose loan was approved by someone I once worked beside. Brandon turned to Victoria. His face a mix of shock and anger. You said that to my mother. Victoria's composure shattered. It wasn't. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? Yes. She couldn't answer. Brandon stood abruptly. We need to go. Victoria grabbed her purse, her hands shaking. Brandon. Not now, he said curtly. They headed for the door. Brandon paused, turned back to me. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I know, I said softly. But you should have. They left. The door clicked shut. I stood in my small apartment, surrounded by the remnants of dinner, and for the first time in years I didn't feel small. Felt strong. The next morning Brandon called. His voice was rough, like he hadn't slept. Mom, can we talk? Of course. I talked to Victoria last night. 4 hours. She admitted what she said. She also admitted she's been pushing me to distance myself from you. My chest tightened. Why? Because she thought you didn't match the life she wanted. The image she wanted to project. He paused. I'm ashamed I let it happen. Brandon. No, let me finish. I've been a terrible son. I let her opinions matter more than our relationship. I let her make you feel unwanted. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Tears welled in my eyes. I just wanted to be part of your life. You are, he said firmly. And from now on that's not changing. I told Victoria we're going to counseling. And we're setting boundaries. She doesn't get to decide who belongs in our family. You do. And you belong, Mom. You always have. I wiped my eyes. Thank you. No, thank you. For not giving up on me. For reminding me where I came from. And for being brave enough to stand up for yourself. We talked for another hour. About everything. About the past, the present, the future. Felt like breathing after being underwater too long. 2 weeks later, Brandon invited me to lunch. Just the 2 of us. We sat in a small diner, eating burgers and fries like we used to when he was young. Victoria wants to apologize, he said carefully. She knows she owes you that. I don't need her apology, I said. But if she wants to give it, I'll listen. He nodded. She's trying, Mom. She's realizing a lot about herself. About how she was raised to value the wrong things. That's good, I said. But Brandon, I need you to understand something. I didn't invite Ray to dinner to punish you. I did it to remind you that respect isn't about money or image. It's about recognizing the people who help you, who love you, who sacrifice for you. I know, he said quietly. And I won't forget again. We finished lunch. As we left, Brandon hugged me tight. I love you, Mom. I love you too. A month passed. Victoria called and asked if she could visit. Loan. I agreed. She arrived at my door looking smaller somehow. Less polished. More human. We sat in my living room, tea between us. Claire, she began, her voice shaking. I owe you an apology. What I said was cruel and wrong. I was so focused on appearances, on what I thought success looked like, that I forgot what actually matters. I stayed quiet, letting her continue. Brandon told me everything you did for him. How you worked 2 jobs, how you sacrificed, how you're still paying loans for his education. I didn't know. Or maybe I didn't want to know. Because it made me feel guilty. Guilty. Yes. Because I never had to struggle like that. My parents gave me everything. And instead of being grateful, I judged people who had less. That's honest, I said. Thank you. She wiped her eyes. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I want to try. I want to be better. Brandon's in counseling with me, and we're both learning. That's good, I said gently. Victoria, I don't hate you. But I won't let anyone make me feel less than I am. I've worked too hard, survived too much. I understand, she whispered. We talked for another hour. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation. But it was real. And real was enough. She left, she turned back. Thank you for not giving up on us. He nodded. I didn't do it for you. I did it for my son. And for myself. She smiled sadly. I know. And that's why it worked. After she left, I sat by the window, watching the sun set over the city. Life didn't transform overnight. Brandon and I rebuilt our relationship slowly. Weekly dinners returned. He started asking about my life, really asking. Victoria tried to. She was awkward at first, overly polite, clearly uncomfortable. But over time she softened. She asked about my years at the bank, about raising Brandon alone. She listened. And slowly, I started to believe she was genuinely changing. Ray and I met for coffee a month later. He grinned when he saw me. So, how'd it go? I laughed. Better than expected. Good. You deserved that moment, Claire. I did, I agreed. And thank you for helping me take it. He shook his head. You didn't need me. You just needed the reminder that you've always had power. You just forgot it for a while. He was right. I'd spent years shrinking myself, accepting crumbs, believing I wasn't enough. But I was enough. I always had been. It's been 6 months since that dinner. Brandon and Victoria are still working on their marriage, still learning what matters. They invite me over regularly now. Victoria even asked for my casserole recipe last week. I gave it to her. Not because I forgave everything instantly, but because healing isn't about holding grudges. It's about choosing to move forward. I still live in my small apartment. I still work at the grocery store. But I carry myself differently now. I don't apologize for who I am or where I come from. 'Cause I've learned something important. Your worth isn't determined by your bank account, your job title, or whether you fit someone's image. It's determined by how you treat people, how you love, how you survive and keep showing up. And I'm proud of who I am. So if this story speaks to you, if you've ever been made to feel small by people who should have lifted you up, remember this. You are enough. Exactly as you are. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply remind them who held the door open in the first place.